The United Nations has reported a significant deterioration in the human rights situation in North and South Kivu in the Democratic Republic of the Congo as the M23 armed groups continues its aggressive territorial expansion. South Korean President Yoon appeared in court for the first preliminary hearing of his criminal trial on charges of insurrection. And in Panama, the government released the 83 workers illegally detained for protesting against government policies. Hello and welcome to From the South. My name is Belén de los Santos. I'm from the teleSUR studio. In North and South Kivu in the Democratic Republic of the Congo as the M23 armed group continues its aggressive territorial expansion. During a recent Security Council meeting, Bintou Keita, the head of UN's peacekeeping mission in the DRC, emphasized the urgent need for decisive action to prevent a wider regional conflict. The ongoing violence has led to increased civilian casualties and displacement, with humanitarian organizations struggling to provide assistance amid the chaos. In January alone, medical facilities in the region treated around 1,400 wounded individuals. The situation is particularly dire in Goma, where power outages have left residents without water and electricity, exacerbating the humanitarian crisis.
Despite many international calls for a ceasefire and the cessation of offensives, the M23, supported by the Rwandan army, has continued to make progress in the provinces of North Kivu and South Kivu. This advance has had devastating consequences, leading to the loss of many human lives during the taking of Goma. The human rights situation in North and South Kivu has considerably worsened. In addition to deaths due to fighting between the M23 and the security forces of the DRC, MONUSCO has also documented cases of forced recruitment.
And in this sense, nearly 200 patients were injured in recent fighting in the eastern part of the country. Among those, 44 were wounded during the battle for control of South Kivu's capital. The patients are currently being treated at Bukavu's Provincial General Reference Hospital, according to the International Committee of the Red Cross. The hospital is operating at over 100% of its capacity, facing significant challenges in medication supply following the looting of the ICRC warehouses in Goma. As the M23 rebels advance, the situation remains precarious, with reports of looting and violence further complicating medical assistance.
Who were injured.
The day I was wounded, I was leaving the compound and saw the M23 were chasing the children of the soldiers they had captured from the Sayo military camp. When we were returning to our compound, they confused us and shot us. There were 3 of us, 2 have died. I'm the only survivor, even though we were in civilian clothing.
We currently have 181 patients in hospital who have been injured by firearms. More specifically, for those who were injured as a result of the events in Bukavu, we have a total of 44 wounded. The majority are male, and we also have 3 children under the age of 15.
And now we move on to Palestine as the resistance movement handed over the bodies of 4 Israeli captives as part of the ceasefire agreement. The handover, scheduled for Thursday in Gaza's Khan Yunis, included the bodies of members of the Bibas family and Adet Lifshit. Spokesman for the Al-Qassam Brigade and the Al-Quds emphasized that they were all alive before Israeli military aircraft deliberately bombed their locations in the Gaza Strip. This comes as part of the 7th batch of the first phase of the prisoners exchange deal under the ceasefire agreement between the Palestinian resistance, Hamas, and Israel, with exchanges having taken place in recent weeks. We now move on to other topics. South Korean President Yoon appeared in court this Thursday for the first preliminary hearings of his criminal trial on charges of insurrection following his declaration of martial law last December. The hearing, which took place at the Seoul Central District Court, aimed to clarify the facts in dispute and plan future legal procedures. Although South Korean law does not require the accused to attend a preliminary hearing, Yoon chose to do so. He has been detained since January 15th amid a criminal investigation into the alleged crime of insurrection for briefly declaring martial law in early December. The penalty for insurrection in South Korea is life imprisonment or capital punishment, for which there has been a moratorium since 1997. And in other news, Germany prepares for parliamentary elections on February 23rd. A few days before the elections, our special envoy Yoon reports from Berlin.
These are extraordinary times for German politics. The ruling coalition of Social Democrats, Greens and Liberals has failed to reach the end of its time, which would have been September 2025.
I think it is incredibly difficult to keep track of this early election campaign. And that's because many parties ultimately don't want to form a coalition with each other or can't imagine one. But there has to be a coalition.
Germany's economy has stopped growing for 2 years, with an official recession. Right-wing parties blame climate change policies, subsidies for renewable energy, discrimination of traditional energy. They propose deregulation in favor of oil and even a return to nuclear energy.
The decisions we take here in Germany have global consequences. We have responsibilities, and it is also time for us to grow up a little. Germany was occupied by foreign countries after the Second World War, and now we have to show that we can do justice to this economic power in foreign policy and also in climate policy.
59 million citizens are called to vote, 2 million less than in 2021, the last federal election. The voting population is decreasing. Despite this, right-wing and ultranationalist parties want to close doors to immigrants and expel those they can.
Migration is being dragged through the parties, but it is not the main issue. Migration is declining across Europe, but it is still being pushed as an issue.
Alternative for Germany Party, AfD, claims to be challenging the political system. None other than U.S. Vice President Vance called on the other parties to form a coalition with it, which they consider to be outside the democratic order.
I think it is extremely important to vote, and I have already done so by post, and what I think everyone hopes is that the AfD party does not become the strongest force in the country. And I hope that also the country will move forward again and that we will find the way back to commonality and go forward after so many problems.
The population will elect 630 members of parliament on Sunday. According to all polls, no party will have an absolute majority. The party with the most votes will have to build a majority. Then the new prime minister and the government will be elected. No mean feat with the programmatic differences that exist.
TeleSUR, Berlin, Alemania. And now we have a short break coming up, but first remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back from the South. We continue with more information. After several days of struggle in the courts and less than 24 hours after a protest, the government of Panama released the 83 workers that were illegally detained for protesting against government policies. The union leadership, the social movement, and the families of the detainees did not rest for a single hour until their release. The judge, Luzmila Jaramillo, questioned by the defense of the workers as being taken over by the executive, ordered their release but obliged them to report every 15 days and prevented them from leaving their provinces of residence. The workers denounced the criminalization of the right to protest and affirmed that they were victims of cruel and degrading treatment during their detention.
The struggle continues, comrades, the fight has to continue. This is not going to restrict our right to continue fighting for the non-law 163 that the Social Security Fund wants to impose on us.
And meanwhile, in Venezuela, President Nicolás Maduro presided a meeting with the Board National Commission for the Constitutional Reform. During the meeting, the Venezuelan head of state urged the commission to disseminate the 4 items of this constitutional reform, which will be discussed nationwide. Maduro further called on the Venezuelan people to take part in this great debate, stressing the need to resume the spirit of plurality and high participation of the 1999 constituent process. In this sense, the president spurred to use all available technological capabilities to encourage popular debates.
A day in which we must prepare the whole intense process to debate, to consult, to draft, and have the proposals for a constitutional reform 2025. It is a necessary and very complex task, but it must be solved with inclusive democratic methods.
Es una tarea necesaria, muy compleja, pero que hay que resolver con métodos incluyentes.
This means that we must listen to and take everyone into account, as we did in the consultation and debate of 1999. For the first time in history, the doors of this federal legislative palace were opened, and for the first time in history, the constituents, who are full members of parliament, went out for the first time to the countryside.
Y por primera vez en la historia, los constituyentes, que son parlamentarios plenipotenciarios y parlamentarias plenipotenciarias, por primera vez salieron a recorrer los campos.
The neighborhoods, the streets, the squares, the universities. For the first time, a debate on the Constitution was held with the whole country.
Sobre la Carta Magna.
And we stay in Venezuela as the National Electoral Council, the CNE, set May 25th as the new date for the upcoming parliamentary elections. The president of the CNE, Elvis Amoroso, declared that by virtue of the meetings between the electoral authorities and organizations of the Venezuelan democratic life, a new date was set for the elections of members of the National Assembly, governors, and legislative councils of the states. Amoroso pointed out that these modifications were made with the intention of promoting the participation of the different actors of society. In addition, the authority confirmed April 27th as the date for the second public consultation of the communes and communal circuits.
Consejo Nacional Electoral decide.
The National Electoral Council decides second national public consultation to choose communal circuit projects for Sunday, April 27th, 2025.
27 de abril de 2025. Elecciones para Asamblea Nacional, gobernadoras, gobernadores de Estado.
Elections for National Assembly, state governors and regional legislative councils to be held on Sunday, May 25th, 2025.
And now we switch topics because moments before leaving for the United States, Argentinian President Javier Milei transformed the national bank into a joint stock company. The move comes amid his alleged involvement in a crypto fraud case. Presidential spokesman Manuel Adorni made the announcement, confirming that the president continues with the deepening of the reform of the state. The decision was promoted by the directors of the banking institution. From now on, it will be called Bank of the Argentinian Nation. The state will own 99.9% of the shares, while the Foundation Bank of the Argentinian Nation will have the remaining 0.1%. And now we have a second short break coming up, but before, we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English. There you will be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Colombian President Gustavo Petro has appointed General Pedro Sanchez as the new Minister of Defense during the Governor's Summit. Sanchez, widely praised for leading the dramatic search and rescue of 4 indigenous children who survived 40 days in the Amazon jungle after a plane crash, becomes the first military officer to hold the role since the 1991 constitutional reforms. His appointment signals a notable shift in Petro's administration, given the president's history as a former guerrilla leader. As defense minister, Sanchez faces mounting security challenges, including escalating violence from armed groups in regions like the Catatumbo. The government's peace efforts have struggled to curb the conflicts, placing pressure on Sanchez to address Colombia's deteriorating security landscape.
We managed to resist for 40 days with troops in the territory and with indigenous people in the territory, living together, and we saved boys and girls. While generals were killing children in Palestine, Colombian generals were saving children in the Colombian Amazon jungle, and that is why I wanted the next Minister of Defense to be General Pedro Sanchez, as I have discussed with the authorities.
We continue in Colombia as more cases and indictments of former military personnel involved in false positives or extrajudicial executions are known, now in the Department of Antioquia. Hernán Tobar expands with more details.
4 generales más 35 oficiales y
4 generals and more than 35 officers and ex-sub-officers were charged by the Special Jurisdiction for Peace for their alleged responsibility in war crimes and crimes against humanity, committed in the Department of Antioquia between 2004 and 2007, and when they belonged to the Army's 4 Brigade. According to the order read by the magistrates of the Reconnaissance Chamber, there was a systematic practice of body counts and killings over captures as a general rule, where pressure was exerted on the troops by senior commanders.
Thus, for example, General González Peña urged the troops in radio programs broadcast between the 17th and the 21st of March 2004 that, and I quote, "The only thing that counts are the casualties. Captures are of no use to us. The only thing that counts is to kill the enemy." And this type of statement was echoed by Rodríguez Clavijo, putting pressure on and threatening the men under his command.
Ejerciendo presión y amenazando a los hombres bajo su mando.
Fueron 440 personas asesinadas por ejecuciones extrajudiciales.
440 people were killed by extrajudicial executions, or also known in the country as false positives and forced disappearances, a practice that was mainly carried out against the weakest, minors, street dwellers, people with physical or mental disabilities, unemployed or peasants and members of the LGBT community, and who were reported as casualties in combat by members of the guerrillas in the Department of Antioquia. For human rights organizations, it was a state policy promoted by the president of the country in that moment.
It is no secret that the speeches of former President Álvaro Uribe were related to the body count that would tell the effectiveness of the national army. From then on, from the casualties in combat, in this case fraudulent, it cannot be ignored that the 4 Brigade was the brigade with the most cases of executions. But at the same time, it was the one that received the most injection of capital from the Colombia Plan. And then, just as it received capital, so it was asked for casualties, as the only operational result that served as an indicator to measure the effectiveness of the national army.
Es la primera vez que la sala de reconocimiento de verdad.
This is the first time that the Truth Recognition Chamber has identified acts of torture against direct victims, or their relatives. In 22 cases involving 41 victims, most of the peasants arbitrarily accused by the military of aiding the guerrillas, including children, have been tortured.
Lamentablemente, entre el universo provisional de
Unfortunately, among the provisional universe of 442 victims of false positives, there are also 26 minors. These are not mere coincidences, but rather criminal patterns whose existence has been proven by the reconnaissance room throughout the length of the country.
This determination is made in Case 3, which investigates false positive events throughout Colombia. The defendants have 30 working days to present additional arguments or evidence.
Pueden presentar argumentos o evidencia adicional.
And now we move on to other topics. In Peru, the National Emergency Operations Center reported that heavy rains left 47 people dead. More than 48,000 people have been affected in the Andean region. Authorities also registered 635 houses that have been destroyed and over 3,600 that have been rendered uninhabitable throughout the country. Specialists from the National Institute of Civil Defense reported that over 1,700 emergencies have been recorded throughout the country. In this sense, the department reporting the highest number of emergencies due to rains and related events were Cusco, followed by Ayacucho, Cajamarca, and Arequipa. Now, like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and also on TikTok. For TeleSUR English, my name is Belén de los Santos. Thank you for watching.